My name's Keser. I'm the Head of Security Advisory at Pure.Security. What that means is that I work with executive management to help them understand their risks around information security. Since the beginning of civilization, we've always worked under rules. What we've seen in the past 3 to 4 years is those rules have now switched and focused towards information security. And there are 4 major material changes that have occurred over that time that are of importance to organisations to understand and to address. So the first thing is that existing compliance regimes around information security have additional requirements that have been added on every year. And that makes the onus in being compliant for organisations much more difficult, and that will continue, I think, in the next couple of years. The second point is that organisations who were never governed by information security compliance requirements are now being captured in new requirements and new legislation that have been introduced. The penalties around non-compliance are ever increasing as well, and some of those are very significant. Our own Australian privacy law, for example, means that a breach where there's shown to be negligence or otherwise can result in up to $10 million of fines or up to 10% of the annual turnover for the organisation itself. And the fourth point is that with all the legislation and compliance changes around the world, there are differences and they're not necessarily consistent. So for an organisation who's participating at the global level, there's a difficulty in understanding how do we manage that from a global perspective. Do we make all our management practices compliant right across the board, which means we're doing things potentially in some jurisdictions we don't need to, or do we break up our management structure to address each jurisdiction in turn? So for example, with some clients we're working with at the moment, we talk to them about what their risks are and how best to address those risks. Now, often some of those methods are not what are prescribed in the compliance regime. They can be way different from that list. For example, where a compliance regime says you must encrypt data, sometimes it's not always technically possible. And so the discussion turns around, well, what else can we do to manage that perceived risk behind not encrypting the data? And often that's things like putting additional controls around monitoring for potential breaches or exploitation of that data, rather than trying to actually stop it in the first place. And that's a legitimate risk management process for management to adopt. Well, the primary thing is that you're participating in active decision making based on a good knowledge base. So for example, in the past few years, we've seen significant lifting of maturity in organisations who are dealing with their third parties. Now, in the past, organisations would say, I've outsourced that service or the operation of my IT environment to a third party, and I don't need to worry about the risks. They know what they're doing, they'll manage that for me. And that's never been the case. There's a couple of reasons for that, and that is that third parties don't intimately understand the nature of your organisation and will only take a risk view from their perspective. They'll be managing their risks, not yours. What that means as an active participant is that you actually need to decide what your risks are and communicate to the third party what you want them to do in terms of responding to those risks and better managing those. So when you get information security risk management right, you'll actually find that compliance is much less of a burden because it becomes part of the narrative around broader risk management and the decision-making processes. So information security management is a complex area and it's something fairly new to most organisations. So it may not be possible for executive management to have a full grip and understanding of what this all means. And so having a partner to work with you to help you through that, that's knowledgeable, has experience behind all this, is a good way to help you manage those risks.